Okay, learning objectives for today. We're going to talk about what are those tasks that happen after submission. We're going to learn how to prepare compliant post-submission materials. That's a whole classification of type of submission. And then another type of submission called just-in-time request, which comes even later after the proposal is submitted. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be talking, I'll talk very briefly about searching for new opportunities and then hand it over to the expert, Chelsea, who will be with us for that portion. Okay, so after submitting, so your RPM has sent an email and said, this has been submitted, no errors or warnings, you're good to go. Always save a copy of the final proposal in the proposal files, and also make sure the final documents are in the shared files for the PI. The PI you will probably have already worked out whether you're going to do it on Google Drive or Medicine Box or Dropbox or wherever, but usually the PI says, I need to have for my records the final copy of everything you uploaded. So if you change the margins, if you change the font, they want to see that final document. Remind them of any compliance areas that may be involved. You know, later on when they get that just-in-time request, they may be asked to give a protocol approval for animal involvement or human subjects involvement, and those take more time than you might think. So just make sure, you know, by the way, this proposal does have human subjects. You may want to submit that IRB, you know, pretty soon. Review if you have an existing protocol, review it against the research strategy for this proposal so that you're ready to go if you get that just-in-time request. We'll talk about that later. And then sometimes the RPM will reach out to you and say that there are some internal approvals that maybe like some threads that you need to tie up. Maybe the proposal development routing form. That's a form we don't really interact with. It goes to the PI and any co-Is, and it also goes to the division manager for approval to participate in the research project. But sometimes the RPM will say, I need you to follow up with certain investigator who hasn't approved yet. Same thing if you had to provide an unrestricted PTA and that didn't get tied up during the proposal phase, making sure you chase down that information so that RMG has it. And then if there were those, you know, we talked about the incomplete trainings. Hopefully we caught those at the time of the PIF, but sometimes something slips through. Just making sure that everything is tied up as well as you possibly can so that if this is awarded, there are no delays. So then I want to talk to you about post-submission materials. And so there's this whole category of materials that can be submitted after the proposal goes in, but it has to be 30 days before peer review. Well, how do I know when is 30 days before peer review, right? So it's going back to your NIH standard due dates. And again, I'm just Googling this. You guys remember that we looked at this in terms of finding the proposal deadlines because we have our cycles 1, 2, and 3, and these are all the deadlines. But if you scroll down further, what you see is that there's more to these cycles than just the deadline for the proposal. The first wave is the scientific merit review, and you can see that that comes a few months after the last deadline for that particular cycle. And this is when the science is reviewed. And so the post-submission material is due back 30 days before that scientific merit review. And why is this? Because we're adding scientific information. This is not to correct an error. You can't go in and say, oh, NIH, sorry, I submitted the wrong authentication of key biological resources attachment. No, you can't do that. But there are some key moments in the PI's career that they can actually report in this phase. One of the most common one is publication of a new article. They want to let the reviewers know that in addition to what was already in the proposal, since then they've published something else in a high impact journal that relates to the science of the proposal. Another one would be if they had a co-investigator who left the university and they need to replace them with someone else with similar expertise, and they'd want to provide that bio sketch so they have the right investigative team that they're reviewing. And the third most common that I've seen is when they get a promotion. You know, if they've gone from associate professor to full professor, they want the review committee to know about that accomplishment. So those are the kinds of things that you would put in a post-submission submission. And we'll talk about these in the breakout rooms, but so you can go to NIH post-submission materials. You can pull up the policy because sometimes the PI will say, I want to submit an interim research product. Well, we'll look at the policy. It's not accepted as post-submission material. So, you know, your PI may send you a list and it looks good to you, but you need to compare it against this NIH policy for post-submission materials to find out if it's allowable. So you'll have some more opportunity to interact with that policy in the breakout session. And then the final reminder, this submission, just like the proposal, has to go through your RPM at RMG. This is not the PI just emailing NIH.